Imagine, if you will, the feeling of drifting downward into a vast open ocean. At first, there is light, sunlight dancing across the waves above, warm and golden, rippling and bending as it filters through the water. The surface is distant now, a shimmering veil growing ever fainter as you descend. Each breath is slower than the last. Each thought becomes quieter. Time no longer seems to move in the way it does on land. The sounds of the world you knew are gone. No footsteps, no voices, no clocks. Only the steady rhythm of your breath, the whisper of currents moving gently past, and the distant hum of life far below. The deeper you drift, the more you feel the past reaching out to you, not in a sudden rush, but in the soft embrace of memory. In the stillness of the deep, shapes begin to emerge from the shadows. Faint outlines at first, then sharper forms, a mast leaning awkwardly on its side, a tangle of beams half buried in the seafloor, ropes stiffened by time, a shattered hull encrusted with barnacles and coral. This is no natural reef. This is something built, something made by hands long forgotten. It is a shipwreck, or what remains of it, suspended in an eternal moment beneath the sea. It is not rust and ruin that first strikes you. It is the quiet dignity of it all. A ship once full of life, now resting in the cradle of the ocean, cradled by sand, softened by silence. It is not decayed. It is preserved, not in the way museums preserve objects, but in the way the sea preserves mystery. All over the world, scattered across the seabeds of every ocean and beneath the surfaces of countless lakes and rivers, lie the bones of lost vessels. Some are ancient, dating back to forgotten civilizations. Others are more recent, swallowed by storms in the last century or two. Many are unknown, never mapped, never recovered, never mourned by name. Some ships sank with their crews and left no trace in the annals of history, only quiet questions resting beneath the waves. Others were grand ships of legend, warships, merchant vessels, exploratory expeditions whose fates were witnessed and recorded, but whose remains still lie undisturbed, waiting for the right moment to be seen again. But this story is not only about the ships themselves. It is about the people who built them, who sailed them, who trusted them to carry their hopes and burdens across the uncertain sea. It is about the silent transformations that take place when the human world meets the power of nature. A vessel crafted by ambition and guided by knowledge can become a ruin in a single hour, or endure in a different form beneath the surface for hundreds of years. The water does not erase, it alters, it softens, it keeps secrets. In the quiet company of the deep, you can begin to imagine what it felt like, not just to sink, but to remain. The moment of the wreck, so often imagined in stories as violent and dramatic, is gone now. What remains is the aftermath, the stillness, the ghost of movement held forever in salt and silt. Perhaps a compass remains, rusted and frozen, a lantern, its flame long extinguished, a pair of boots, a logbook waterlogged and fragile, barely readable, and around it all the life of the sea continues, indifferent and yet strangely tender. Fish weaving through broken planks, anemones blooming from collapsed stairwells, a crab scuttling across the curve of a cannon. And so this is where we begin our journey tonight, not in a port bustling with sailors and cargo, not in a naval battle or a stormy tale of survival, but here at the bottom of the sea in the company of memory. The shipwreck is not the end of the story. It is only a different chapter, a quieter one that unfolds slowly and patiently like a dream. If you listen closely, you might hear the creak of wood that no longer moves, the flap of sails that no longer rise, the echo of footsteps on a deck that no longer floats. But more than that, you will feel the presence of time itself, not rushing forward, but pulling gently around you like the sea. You may find yourself wondering what this ship once carried. Was it a cargo of spices and silver, headed across the ocean on behalf of a distant empire? Was it a fishing vessel returning home with a modest catch and the stories of the sea? Was it a warship, proud and prepared, with cannons primed and sails tall, now silenced forever by a misstep or a cruel twist of weather? Was it simply a forgotten boat with no great story attached to it, and yet still meaningful because it was once made, once used, once cared for? Beneath the ocean, all wrecks are equal in the stillness. Their value lies not in what they did, but in what they now teach us about fragility, about change, about the power of slowness and silence. And here is where we will stay for the next hours, floating between the past and the present, letting the tide carry us gently from one wreck to the next, not to uncover lost treasure or solve long cold mysteries, but simply to rest in their company. The ocean has always been a keeper of secrets, and tonight it invites you to listen. No pressure, no need to remember names or dates. Just let the rhythm of the sea and the calm unfolding of history guide you toward sleep or reflection or peaceful stillness. If you enjoy storytelling like this, slow, gentle, calming, please let us know with a like and feel free to comment below. Share which moment of this story touched you, or simply say hello from where you are. And if you would like more of these sleepy journeys into forgotten history, please subscribe and join us again. Every video is a passage into the quiet corners of the past, made for bedtime and gentle dreaming. As you settle further into stillness, know that this is only the beginning. There are many shipwrecks still waiting to be remembered, many stories still asleep beneath the waves, and together we will visit them, slowly, quietly, and with the soft attention that they deserve. Let the waves continue their lullaby. Let the silence deepen. And when you are ready, we will begin our next segment, where the ambitions of humanity meet the unpredictability of the sea, and history unfolds in wind and wood. Long before the wrecks were silent, they were full of life. Ships did not begin as ruins, and sailors did not expect to vanish beneath the sea. There was a time for every sunken vessel when it sat tall in the harbor, proud and ready, wooden planks freshly nailed, ropes carefully coiled, provisions stacked in orderly rows, the scent of salt mixed with pitch and pine. Men and women moved with purpose, checking manifests, testing sails, kissing loved ones goodbye. The ship was not yet history. It was potential. It was promise. It had not yet earned the silence that would one day come. Each vessel had its role. Some were merchant ships, their holds packed tight with goods from distant lands, cinnamon from Ceylon, porcelain from China, furs from the north. Others were warships, their decks lined with cannon, their flags held high, ready to enforce a crown's will across vast waters. There were exploration vessels, designed for long, uncertain voyages into maps not yet filled in, carrying astronomers and botanists and surveyors who would sketch coastlines never before seen. And there were simpler ships, too, fishing boats, ferries, family crafts, smaller, but no less important, sailing with courage on familiar tides. No matter their size or purpose, each journey began with intention, a destination, a charted course, a crew with hopes and fears and names now lost to time. And yet, for so many of these voyages, something shifted. Perhaps it was the weather, a sudden squall from the west, wind turning sharp and wild. Perhaps it was a miscalculation, a reef misread, a coastline too close in the dark. Sometimes it was conflict, ships attacked, boarded, burned, and sometimes it was no drama at all. Simply a leak unnoticed, a hull slowly filling, a gradual tilt, then a final, quiet plunge. History has recorded the names of some of these ships, remembered them for their tragedy, their grandeur, their timing. Others remain unknown, their names erased by salt and sea, their stories incomplete. But in the echoes that remain, we feel something familiar, not only loss, but ambition, not only failure, but the bravery of setting out in the first place. Take, for example, the Mary Rose. She was a proud English warship, launched in the early 1500s, a marvel of her time. She fought in battles. She flew the flag of a growing empire. And yet, one summer day in 1545, during a skirmish in the Solent, she tilted suddenly as she turned to fire. Perhaps her gun ports were left open. Perhaps a gust caught her at the wrong angle. In moments, she took on water and sank. Over 400 souls went down with her, within sight of land, within earshot of safety. For centuries she lay forgotten beneath the sea, until, in the late 20th century, she was carefully raised, preserved, and displayed. A fragment of a world long past, restored to view. Then there's the Visa, Sweden's great warship, a floating fortress of ambition and pride, built to impress, to intimidate, to declare naval supremacy. But her builders misjudged her balance. She was too top-heavy, her upper decks too crowded with heavy guns. On her maiden voyage in 1628, she sailed only a short distance before a strong gust caught her. She heeled over, water rushed in, and she sank before the watching crowd. A ship meant to be legend became a lesson. Centuries later, divers rediscovered her in remarkable condition. Today she rests in a museum, a monument to beauty, hubris, and human error. These are the famous stories, the ones studied and memorialized. But they are only a handful among countless others. Ships that carried soldiers or settlers or enslaved people, or messages never delivered. Some were lost during storms too remote to be noticed. Others disappeared along coastlines where no search could be mounted. They lie beneath Arctic ice, beneath tropical reefs, beneath inland rivers long since changed by the flow of time. And what of the people aboard? Most are unnamed, forgotten by the official records, but they lived, they worked. They laughed and worried and wrote letters and argued about rations. They looked up at stars the same way we still do, wondering how much farther, how much longer, how much safer it might be ahead. Some were seasoned sailors. Others were passengers, children, cooks, doctors, translators, laborers. They each had reasons to be aboard. They each had plans. And then, at some point, they were not above the water anymore. They were below it. But it is important to remember that these were not only moments of loss. Each shipwreck is preceded by a journey, a voyage taken, a risk embraced. These vessels were not built to fail. They were built to reach. They represent human effort, determination, and the willingness to face the unknown. They are echoes not just of tragedy, but of triumph. They remind us of how far we are willing to go and what we are willing to risk for trade, for knowledge, for belief, for survival. Sometimes after a shipwreck, survivors would reach shore and tell the tale. Other times they vanished without trace. In a few cases, the wreck itself would wash ashore, broken and empty, a puzzle for those who found it. And in rare, miraculous moments, the wreck would be found centuries later, buried in silt, perfectly preserved, a time capsule of life paused in motion. Plates still stacked, shoes still tucked beneath hammocks, a spoon, a journal, a belt buckle. These quiet details speak more than any chronicle. They reveal that history is not only about leaders and battles. It is also about the ordinary, the daily lives frozen by the sea, the little moments sealed in water and time. Tonight we do not need to catalog every famous shipwreck. Instead, we float gently among their remains, listening to the soft stories they still tell. Stories of beginnings as well as endings. Stories of preparation and trust, of ambition and acceptance. Not every ship was doomed, but those that were have much to say. As you rest now, rocked by the rhythm of the waves and the hush of memory, let yourself drift with them. No need to hurry. No need to reach the surface just yet. The sea holds you softly. The past surrounds you gently. In the next segment, we will explore what happens after the wreck, when the sea begins to reclaim what humans once made. We will visit the places where ships once dead have become reefs of color and life blooming in slow silence. Let yourself float there. Let yourself sleep, if sleep comes. We are not finished yet. There is still beauty waiting in the ocean's embrace. When a ship slips beneath the surface of the water, its purpose may end, but its story does not. In that moment of descent, violent or calm, known or unseen, something begins. What was once made for motion becomes still. What was once meant to conquer the sea becomes part of it. The wreck does not vanish. It transforms, slowly, gently. In time, the ocean begins its quiet work, not of erasure, but of reclamation. At first, there is shock. Broken timbers, torn canvas, scattered cargo. The weight of water presses into every crevice, into every hatch, into every dream. The sea takes what it is given and wraps it in salt and silt. Paint fades, metal dulls. The outlines of the ship grow soft. But this is not decay in the way the land knows it. It is not fire or rot or wind. It is something different, slower, quieter, and strangely beautiful. Where the hull splinters, coral takes root. Where nails once held boards together, barnacles begin to gather. Where the captain's quarters once stood, sea anemones bloom in soft, waving clouds. The railings become ledges. The decks become caves. The hold becomes a hollow cathedral, open to the tide. The ocean does not destroy the ship. It reshapes it. It weaves it into the life of the sea. In warm, shallow waters, a shipwreck can become a reef in only a few years. Tiny polyps find purchase on jagged beams, laying down layer after layer of calcium carbonate, building colonies that stretch outward in delicate lacework. Fish soon follow, seeking food, seeking shelter, seeking home. First come the small ones, the scouts, damsels, gobies, wrasses, then larger visitors, groupers, parrotfish, reef sharks. Over time, the wreck is no longer just wood and iron. It is living. breathing, flourishing. The transformation is not only physical, it is emotional. What was once a place of disaster becomes a place of wonder. Divers descend slowly toward sunlit wrecks and are greeted by clouds of fish, swirls of color, shafts of light cutting through rusted ribs. There is no sadness here, only awe, only quiet reverence. In colder, deeper waters, the process is slower, but no less profound. Here the wrecks do not become reefs, but monuments, preserved by darkness, by pressure, by temperature. Wood that would rot in the air remains intact beneath the sea. Canvas stiffens but holds. Even paper, in some rare cases, survives, its ink faded, its words barely legible, but still there, a whisper from another world. These wrecks are eerie in their stillness, a wheelhouse frozen in time, a ladder still bolted in place, a boot, a bottle, a rusted kettle. No movement, no sound, and yet the sense that life was once here. The silence is not empty, it is full of what used to be, and it is full of what now is. In the bowels of these wrecks, strange creatures make their homes. Crabs the size of dinner plates scuttle across portholes. Eels coil in the shadows of cargo bays. Jellyfish drift through open doorways. Sometimes a whale will pass by, enormous and quiet, indifferent to the artifacts of men. And sometimes only the current moves, tugging gently at torn flags, brushing against old ropes, swirling sand into ghostly clouds. There is a ship off the coast of the Bahamas, known as the Sapona, a concrete-hulled vessel built during the First World War. She ran aground in a storm in the 1920s, her skeleton now resting in shallow water. For decades she has stood upright, her walls open to the sky, her decks a playground for fish and coral. Storms have battered her, time has worn her edges, but still she remains. A ruin, yes, but also a reef, a landmark, a reminder. Not far from there lies the wreck of the SS Thistlegorm, a British armed freighter sunk in 1941 in the Red Sea. She carried trucks, motorcycles, rifles, and aircraft parts, all of which now lie scattered on the seafloor, visited by divers and encased in marine growth. Her cargo is no longer a tool of war. It is an underwater museum, touched by time and tide, made strange and beautiful by the ocean. In Micronesia's Truk Lagoon, dozens of Japanese ships were sunk during a massive Allied attack in 1944. Today, they are some of the most extraordinary dive sites in the world. Coral-encrusted hulls, tanks lying sideways in cargo bays, sake bottles, gas masks, even shoes, all resting quietly under the sea, their violence long gone, their silence complete. Nature and time claimed every corner. There is something deeply comforting in this process, the idea that what is broken can become whole again in a different form, that what is lost can still have value, can still support life, can still inspire awe. The wrecks remind us that time does not end with failure, that stillness is not absence, that the world continues to create, even from the pieces we leave behind. The ocean's embrace is not cruel. It is patient. It is all-encompassing. It does not rush. It does not punish. It accepts. It enfolds. It transforms. Tonight, as you listen to the soft rhythm of waves and let your thoughts drift freely, think of the wrecks resting below the surface. Think of the way they have become something more than they once were. No longer ships, and not quite ruins, but something in between, something timeless, something sacred. Let this thought lull you further into rest. You are safe here. You are drifting, gently, in a place where even the past is held with care. The sea does not forget. The sea remembers in its own quiet way. In the next segment, we will rise just a little, not to the surface, but to the edge of human curiosity, where modern divers and archaeologists descend into this deep silence, not for treasure, but for understanding. They come not to claim, but to listen, to learn, to preserve. But for now, remain still. Let the water hold you. Let sleep find you as the shipwrecks continue to bloom in silence far below. Long after the winds have settled and the last ripple has passed over a sunken ship, long after the names have faded from the logs and the wood has softened beneath layers of salt, there is another chapter to be written, one that does not begin with sails or storms, but with the slow descent of divers, archaeologists, and explorers. These are not adventurers in search of gold or glory. These are listeners, seekers, gentle custodians of memory who slip beneath the waves not to claim, but to witness. They come quietly, with cameras instead of cannon, notebooks instead of flags, and curiosity instead of conquest. The wrecks they visit are not just ruins. They are time capsules, sealed by water, protected by depth, untouched by the rapid erosion of the surface world. These vessels, hidden in silence, preserve moments that no longer exist above ground. A sailor's tool chest, untouched since the day it was stowed. A porcelain bowl still holding the shape of the hands that once used it. A coat hanging where it was last worn. These details are delicate, and so are the hands that study them. Each touch must be light. Each decision must be careful, for the deep sea does not offer second chances. Underwater archaeology is not the plundering of treasure as romanticized by fiction. It is the patient, respectful work of documenting what remains without disturbing its quiet. Divers do not yank open doors or pry loose artifacts. They hover, still and neutral, mapping every fragment with slow, deliberate care. They measure, they photograph, they sketch. They sometimes recover an object, but only when it risks being lost forever, and only when it can be studied in a way that honors its story. These professionals often spend years planning an expedition. Locating a wreck is no simple task. It requires sonar scans, historic research, underwater drones, and an understanding of shifting currents and sediment patterns. Many wrecks are found only after decades of searching. Some are found by accident, stumbled upon by fishermen, noticed by satellite, or revealed by retreating sands after a storm. But once found, the true work begins. Not excavation, but observation. One of the greatest challenges they face is balance. The ocean preserves, yes, but it also reclaims. The moment a wreck is exposed to air, its slow preservation ends. Iron begins to corrode rapidly. Textiles decay. Even a human breath can speed the loss of fragile organic material. And so the question becomes, what is worth touching? What is worth disturbing? The best underwater archaeologists know that not all knowledge needs to be recovered. Some can be left in place. Some stories are clearest when left undisturbed. And then there is the legal question. Who owns a wreck? Is it the nation under whose flag it once sailed? The descendants of the crew? The nearest government? The team that finds it? The world? Maritime law is a complex web of competing interests, historical, cultural, political, and ethical. Some countries have passed laws declaring all sunken vessels as protected heritage. Others have allowed private companies to extract valuable goods. The debate continues, with every new discovery prompting questions about who has the right to explore the past and who has the responsibility to protect it. In recent decades, advances in technology have allowed researchers to explore depths previously unreachable. Robotic submarines equipped with high-resolution cameras now descend thousands of meters, revealing wrecks untouched by humans. These ships rest in blackness so complete that light must be brought to them artificially. Their decks are covered in sediment, but the shapes remain. Cannons still point outward. Ladders still rise to nowhere. Whole sections remain intact, untouched since the day they sank. One such discovery is the wreck of the HMS Erebus, one of the two ships lost during the ill-fated Franklin expedition in the Arctic. For more than a century, their fate was a mystery, a haunting tale of cold, hunger, and disappearance. But in 2014, Erebus was finally found, remarkably preserved in the icy Canadian waters. Her timbers still held fast. Her story, once lost, could now be pieced together, not with drama, not with assumptions, but with evidence gently recovered, patiently studied. In another part of the world, in the Black Sea, one of the most oxygen-deprived bodies of water on Earth, researchers discovered shipwrecks over 2,000 years old, nearly untouched. Their masts still stood. Their hulls were intact. Sealed by depth, shielded by chemistry, they had avoided the decay that takes most wood. These vessels were not only archaeological finds, they were visual echoes of ancient times, floating just beyond sight, speaking in a language of design and craftsmanship long forgotten. And yet, even with these tools and findings, there is something greater than information. There is reverence, a growing awareness that these are not just wrecks, but resting places. Many ships were tombs, unintentional but final. People died in these cabins. They breathed their last beneath these beams. Their names may be lost, but their presence lingers in the space. And so divers and scholars speak in whispers. They move slowly. They document not for fame, but for memory. You can imagine what it feels like to swim slowly through the collapsed hallway of a ship built before your great-grandparents were born, to see a plate still resting on a table, to glimpse the open page of a ledger, its ink faded but intact, to move past a porthole and see only the infinite blue beyond. There is no urgency here, only stillness, only questions, only respect. Not every shipwreck needs to be raised. Some can remain where they are, quiet, protected, studied from afar. There is beauty in restraint, in listening, in learning without taking. So as we pause here in this space between memory and discovery, take a moment to feel the weight of care, not just for what was lost, but for how we choose to remember it. Think of the researchers who spend decades gently unlocking one story, not for profit, but for understanding. Think of the divers who hover breath held as they drift past a lantern, a bottle, a name carved into wood. Think of the people who never returned, and those who now guard their final places. In the next segment, we will step back even further, from preservation to reflection. We will ask what all these wrecks, these quiet graves and living reefs, can teach us about the nature of time, the fragility of ambition, and the quiet power of stillness. But for now, let the sea hold you. Let the wrecks rest. Let the stories unfold, not in a rush, but in ripples, one breath at a time. Sleep is welcome here. You are safe in the silence of the deep. The sea does not forget. It carries no clocks, no calendars. Yet it remembers in the quiet way that only water can, by holding gently what has been left behind. Every wreck, every shattered hull and rusted nail resting on the ocean floor is a kind of memory. A memory not just of one ship's fate, but of the people who built it, sailed it, lost it, and searched for it. The ocean cradles those memories without judgment, without agenda. And slowly, through patient observation and quiet reflection, we begin to see how those remnants shape our understanding, not only of history, but of ourselves. The legacy of a shipwreck is never just the moment it sank. That moment, however tragic or dramatic, is only one thread in a far longer weave. A ship's story begins long before the first plank is nailed in place. It begins with ideas, with ambitions drawn on parchment, with cargo planned, with voyages imagined. Every bolt, every knot, every map in the captain's cabin was the result of choice and effort. These vessels represented the best of what a people knew about navigation, engineering, trade, and survival. And when they failed, when the sea proved stronger, those failures became part of the legacy as well. The ocean is a teacher, though it teaches softly. It does not raise its voice. It reveals its lessons slowly, over time, as we learn to listen more closely. Some of the greatest advances in maritime engineering have come not from blueprints, but from the examination of wrecks. By studying how ships broke apart, how hulls failed, how masts splintered, future builders have created safer, stronger vessels. The tragedies of the past, when treated with care, become guidance for the present. But beyond the physical, there is another kind of legacy that these wrecks offer, one of reflection. Shipwrecks remind us that even the most carefully planned journeys can change in an instant. They remind us that we are not separate from nature, but always in conversation with it. The wind cannot be commanded. The tide cannot be reasoned with. And sometimes, despite preparation and courage, we are asked to surrender, not in defeat, but in humility. The deeper message of a wreck lies in its stillness. There is power in silence, in the absence of movement. It forces us to slow down, to observe without haste, to feel the weight of time not in hours or days, but in centuries. When you look upon a shipwreck, you are not just seeing decay. You are seeing endurance. A wooden beam, softened by centuries but still holding shape, becomes a symbol of quiet resilience. An iron anchor, now home to sea urchins and moss, tells a story not of loss, but of transformation. There is also something deeply human in our need to remember, to catalog, to preserve. Museums across the world now display artifacts recovered from beneath the sea, not for spectacle, but for reverence. A compass, a shoe, a spoon, ordinary objects elevated by context. These were the things touched by hands long gone, used by people who never imagined their belongings would one day be behind glass, observed in hushed silence. These items connect us. They remind us that history is not just about emperors and wars, but about daily life, about small choices, about people very much like us. Some wrecks have become symbols of national identity. Others remain personal, quietly honored by descendants or locals who pass down their stories. Still others exist in the realm of myth, never found, never confirmed, but deeply felt. The legacy of a shipwreck is not always based on what we know, but on what we imagine, on what we feel in our bones when we hear the creak of wood or see the swell of waves against stone. The ocean has a way of stirring our oldest instincts, our awe, our fear, our longing to understand what lies just beyond reach. And so we build memorials, we write songs, we draw maps, we share stories around fires or through screens, trying to capture what was lost, or perhaps what was never truly lost at all. For the shipwreck, once discovered or even simply remembered, continues to speak. It lives on in the way we walk through a maritime museum, or read a sailor's journal, or stand at a shoreline watching the tide roll in and wonder what lies below. There is also an environmental legacy to consider. As we have seen, many shipwrecks become reefs, supporting ecosystems more vibrant than anything the ship's builders could have imagined. In this way, human creation is folded back into the natural world. The line between artifact and environment begins to blur. A cannon becomes a coral tower. A wheelhouse becomes a nursery for fish. The sea takes what was once purely human and gives it a new role, a new meaning, a new life. In recent years, even modern navies and governments have begun to recognize this power. Decommissioned ships are now sometimes sunk deliberately to create artificial reefs, carefully prepared, stripped of hazards, and lowered into the sea where they might serve as sanctuaries for marine life. These intentional wrecks carry their own legacy, one born of choice rather than disaster. They show us that we can learn from the past and even find ways to participate in the ocean's quiet renewal. As you drift further into calm, let these thoughts settle with you. The story of the shipwreck is not one of abrupt ends, but of long echoes, of change that does not erase, but reveals. The sea does not bury, it holds, it cradles, it invites. Think of all that remains below the surface, not just in the physical sense, but in memory, in meaning, in story. Think of how each wreck, whether known or unknown, has something to offer, something to teach, something to remind us that stillness is not empty, that silence is not the end. In the next segment, we will return to shore, not to leave the wrecks behind, but to understand how stories of the sea live on in our cultures, our languages, our beliefs. The shipwreck, you will find, does not end in the water. It continues in song and superstition and lullabies and in the quiet lessons we carry without realizing it. But for now, let your thoughts continue to float. Let your breath remain slow. The waves are still. The deep is calm, and the legacy endures. Even long after the wood has vanished into sand and the metal has been swallowed by coral, the memory of a shipwreck lingers. It does not live only in wreckage and museum glass, or in archaeological reports. It lives in the quieter places, in language, in lullabies, in stories whispered across generations, in the hush that falls over fishermen when the wind shifts suddenly at sea. There is something ancient about how we remember these disasters. We do not only tell of them, we feel them. Somewhere deep within our collective memory, shipwrecks continue to echo, not just as fact, but as myth, as omen, as symbol. The ocean has always been more than a body of water. For those who live near it, sail upon it, or dream of it, it is a place of awe, vast, moody, unknowable. It is both provider and destroyer, pathway and barrier. And when ships vanish into it, we do not forget. Instead, we wrap those vanishings in meaning. In many coastal cultures, tales of shipwrecks are told not to explain what happened, but to make peace with it, to give shape to something that is otherwise shapeless, an event with no witnesses, an ending without closure. Some of the earliest recorded legends speak of vessels lost at sea. Ancient Greek poets sang of Odysseus, cursed to wander shipless after divine wrath dashed his fleet. Norse sagas told of longboats swallowed by stormy seas, their oarsmen drifting into the afterlife on the backs of sea serpents. Polynesian navigators passed down chants of missing canoes, guided not by stars but by ancestral spirits. And in each tale, the wreck is never just the end of a journey. It is the transformation of the sailor, from traveler to myth, from person to presence. Across cultures, the sea is often said to have moods. It can be merciful or jealous, calm or vengeful. To lose a ship was not always seen as a mechanical failure or an unfortunate accident. It was sometimes interpreted as a sign, a punishment, a warning, a turning of fate. Sailors carried with them superstitions as tightly as they carried ropes and charts. Whistling on board might summon a storm. Cutting a hairline on deck might invite misfortune. Changing a ship's name was to tempt the sea's wrath. And perhaps most solemn of all was the belief that the sea keeps what it takes. To disturb a wreck, to steal from it, was to invite curse. To dive for plunder was to dive into haunted waters. Even today, divers and salvagers speak in hushed tones about places that feel different, a pressure, a silence, a resistance, as though the sea itself remembers and does not take kindly to intrusion. Wrecks become sacred by absence. The crew is gone, yet their final place remains. And in the quiet mystery of that absence we make stories. A lighthouse keeper who still sees lanterns flickering at night on a reef where a schooner went down 100 years before. A stretch of coastline where no birds sing, said to be the resting place of drowned sailors. A ship that vanishes every 7 years, seen only by those fated to disappear. These are not stories meant to be taken literally, and yet they persist, not because they are true in the factual sense, but because they are true in the emotional sense. They give shape to grief. They give reason to randomness. They let people name what has been lost and to feel less alone in the presence of great silence. Even in the realm of lullabies and bedtime tales, shipwrecks appear. In some cultures, songs are sung to children about sailors who drifted off to sea and never returned, not to frighten, but to soothe, to say, "The sea is big and strange and sometimes takes without warning, but we are here. We remember. The waves may carry them far, but the memory stays near." In coastal villages, rituals still take place in memory of wrecks long past. Offerings are left on the shore. Bells are rung. Names are read. Not for the famous ships necessarily, not just for the Titanics and the Lusitanias, but for the unknown vessels, the small fishing boats that never came. Home the cargo ships that vanished without a trace, the lifeboats that drifted too far. There is reverence in the forgetting, too. Not every wreck needs to be named. Not every sight needs to be found. Some are allowed to remain mysteries, left untouched beneath the water, their stories told not through evidence, but through feeling. A painting, a poem, a silence that falls at the mention of a certain date, a certain storm. These cultural echoes are not accidents. They are signs of how deeply the ocean shapes us, not just in trade and exploration, but in our inner lives. A shipwreck is not only a maritime event, it is a metaphor. It speaks to what we lose without warning, to the fragility of plans, to the way even our strongest structures can give way, and yet it also speaks to what endures, memory, love, story. We carry wrecks within us. Each of us has known storms, has felt lost at sea in some way, and perhaps that is why these stories comfort us, because they say, you are not alone. Others have vanished into the deep and been remembered. Others have drifted and returned in tale, if not in body. So as you lie back now, listening to the waves that murmur gently in the distance, consider how many stories rest in the deep, not just beneath the water, but within you. Let the myths settle like silt on the seafloor. Let the superstitions curl around you like fog on a still morning. There is nothing to fear here, only quiet remembering. In the next segment, we will explore the most mysterious shipwrecks ever discovered. Wrecks that defy explanation, that raise more questions than answers, that still whisper across time with riddles unsolved. But for now, let this moment be still. Let the myths float gently around you. Let the past rest. And if your eyes begin to close, let them. The shipwrecks will wait. Not every wreck speaks clearly. Some lie in silence too deep to decode, their stories scattered like silt, their clues worn soft by time. There are vessels on the ocean floor that do not offer answers. They offer questions, delicate, persistent, unending, and there is a quiet kind of wonder in that, in not knowing, in being allowed to imagine what happened, in being left to drift within possibility. Some shipwrecks leave behind cargo, but no crew. Others arrive at shore with meals still warm, candles still flickering, and yet no sign of life. Some are never found at all, only whispered of, guessed at, mapped by shadows and speculation. They are real, and yet they feel like dreams that never fully reveal themselves. These are the mysteries of the sea, the unsolved chapters in an already ancient story. Consider the case of the Mary Celeste, a merchant brigantine discovered adrift in the Atlantic in 1872, perfectly seaworthy but abandoned. Her sails were set. Her cargo, barrels of alcohol, mostly intact. There were no signs of struggle. The lifeboat was missing, but the ship was not damaged. The captain's log stopped without warning. The crew's personal items were untouched, their belongings neatly arranged, as though they had only stepped out for a moment. And yet they were gone, all of them, without trace. Theories have circled ever since, storms, mutiny, pirates, alcohol, fumes, but none have settled the silence. The ship drifted alone until she was found, and she remains one of the sea's most haunting questions. Or take the USS Cyclops, a massive U.S. Navy collier that vanished in 1918 while en route from Barbados to Baltimore. She carried over 300 people and thousands of tons of cargo. No distress call was ever received. No wreckage was found. The weather was fair. Her disappearance led to the popularization of the term Bermuda Triangle, and yet no credible explanation has ever been confirmed. Some say mechanical failure, some suggest sabotage. Others simply say the ship was swallowed by the sea, as if the ocean had closed its hand around her and never let go. In the Baltic Sea, divers in recent decades discovered something even stranger, a wreck now referred to as the Baltic Sea Anomaly. At first it appeared to be a shipwreck, but its shape was unlike anything else. Circular, with unnatural angles, resembling perhaps a fortress or even a machine. It lies on the seafloor like a question mark carved in stone. Some say it is just a geological formation. Others are not so sure. Its origin remains uncertain, its purpose unknown, and it rests in that vast gray space between science and story. There are ships found deep beneath polar ice, their hulls preserved in the cold, their insides untouched for over a century. The Franklin expedition, long a mystery, yielded wrecks like HMS Erebus and HMS Terror, but the full story of what happened to their crew has never been fully resolved. Starvation, illness, cold, yes, these left their marks. But how exactly the men lived, how they struggled, what final thoughts they held as the Arctic closed around them. These truths remain frozen in a past we cannot reach. Some wrecks appear on sonar scans, but vanish when approached. Others are found far from where they were believed to have gone down, suggesting last-minute changes in course or desperate, undocumented maneuvers. There are vessels known only through rumor, ships said to have sunk with treasure aboard, or carrying secrets, or cursed cargo. Divers seek them, maps point toward them, but the wrecks themselves remain just out of reach, like thoughts forgotten just before waking. Even in recent years, ships have gone missing in strange ways. A modern vessel fitted with satellite trackers, navigation systems, and emergency beacons, and yet number signal, no trace, no reason. And perhaps that is what makes these mysteries so quietly powerful. They defy the idea that we can know everything, that we are in control. They remind us that the sea still holds dominion over its depths, and that not all stories rise to the surface. For those who study the sea, these unanswered wrecks are not frustrations, they are invitations to look deeper, to ask gently, to wonder without rushing. In mystery there is humility. There is a chance to be quiet and still, and accept that some truths do not yield themselves quickly or ever. And for those listening now in the soft dark of your room, or beneath a blanket of sleep, these shipwreck mysteries offer a space to dream. What happened to the crew of the Mary Celeste? Why did the Cyclops vanish without a sound? What strange vessel rests beneath the Baltic? Let your thoughts drift with these questions, not to solve them, but to rest in the wondering. The sea has always been a keeper of secrets, not cruelly, but calmly. Its silence is not punishment. It is presence. It is waiting. It is depth. In the next segment, we will explore the personal stories found in letters, journals, and artifacts recovered from beneath the waves. Quiet, intimate voices of those who once sailed and never returned. For now, let the mysteries hold you. Let the unknown be a comfort. Let sleep settle like silt, layer upon layer, soft and slow. The wrecks will remain, so will the questions. And that is enough. Sometimes the most haunting echoes from the deep are not cannonballs or timbers or anchors, but the smallest things, a pair of boots, a handwritten letter, a spoon. These artifacts, pulled gently from centuries of silence, speak not in shouts but in murmurs. They remind us that history is not made only of battles and dates. It is made of people, of ordinary lives, of those who sailed not for fame, but for work, for duty, for family, or for dreams. When divers descend to a wreck and retrieve a cup or a comb, they are not just finding an object. They are finding a voice, a soft voice, perhaps, but clear. It tells us, Someone was here. Someone touched this. Someone carried it on board and set it down one last time. These belongings carry weight, not because they are valuable in gold or silver, but because they are fragments of a moment. And when raised from the sea, they allow us to glimpse lives that ended far from home, in quiet surrender to the deep. On board the wreck of the Titanic, recovered decades after its descent into the North Atlantic, were many such voices. A leather suitcase, a perfume vial, a pair of reading glasses, bent but intact. These were not riches. They were relics of daily life, paused mid-motion. A woman's glove found resting in the mud. A diary, water-softened, but still faintly legible. Words that were meant for no one but the writer, preserved by pressure and cold and chance. It is difficult to see such things without emotion. They are quiet testaments to all that was interrupted. Elsewhere in the wreck of the General Slocum, a steamboat that caught fire in 1904 near New York, small shoes were recovered. Children's shoes. The ship had carried mostly women and children on a church outing. Over 1,000 lives were lost, and among the ashes and wreckage those tiny shoes said more than any report ever could. They do not shout. They do not explain. They simply exist, and in doing so, they speak. From the wreck of the Vasa, a Swedish warship that sank on its maiden voyage in 1628, archaeologists uncovered not only the massive, elaborately carved hull, but also the possessions of the sailors and soldiers aboard, cones made of bone, tiny dice, wooden bowls. One crewman was found still wearing his belt, his shoes carefully buckled. Another had a pouch of coins. Another, a knife. These items, laid bare in the cold water for over 300 years, allow us to feel, not just know, that these were real people with morning routines, hopes, worries, and stories of their own. The Mary Rose, Henry VIII's flagship, sank in 1545 and was recovered over 4 centuries later. On board were longbows, tools, musical instruments, and surgical kits, along with personal effects such as a mirror, a pewter mug, and a leather wrist guard. These tell of a world familiar and yet foreign, echoing across time with surprising clarity. The sailors were young, many under the age of 25. They had names we will never learn, but we know how they wore their hair, what they ate, what they carried with them, and somehow that is enough to bring them near. Even unidentified wrecks, those with no famous names, no royal affiliations, can yield deep emotion. A small merchant ship found off the coast of Spain revealed a ceramic jar with dried olives still inside. Another wreck, centuries old, held a carved wooden flute. Another still had sealed bottles of wine undisturbed. These are not grand treasures. They are human traces, things meant to be used, held, shared, things that now tell stories by their survival alone. And sometimes it is not the object itself, but what it contains. In rare cases, letters have been recovered, words that once passed from one hand to another, never intended for more than one pair of eyes. In these we find emotion raw and undistilled, a father's promise, a mother's worry, a lover's farewell. The ink may be faded, but the feeling endures. These belongings offer a form of gentle resurrection. We do not know the full lives behind each item, but we sense them. We imagine them, a pipe carefully wrapped in cloth, a rosary tucked in a pocket, a mirror reflecting a last glance before storm or fire or wave took its turn. Museums today display many such artifacts with reverence. Visitors walk slowly. They speak softly. There is a sense of sacredness, as if the air itself knows it is holding more than just history. It is holding memory. The belongings recovered from wrecks are not meant to entertain. They are meant to honor. They are fragments of lives interrupted, carried across centuries by salt water and silence. As you rest now, picture these items not as relics, but as whispers. Each one a sentence that was never finished, now floating softly in the current of time. The voices they carry do not ask to be remembered loudly, only gently, only with kindness. In the next segment, we will journey into the future, exploring how the study of shipwrecks continues to evolve and how technology is revealing deeper truths while raising new questions. But for now, remain still. Let these voices from the deep settle around you like a warm blanket of memory. Let them speak to the quiet parts of your heart. Sleep comes easily when the stories are soft, and tonight they are softer than ever. The sea is old, but it is not finished. It has not yet told all of its stories, and perhaps it never will. Even now, beneath its shifting blue surface, wrecks lie undisturbed. Hundreds of thousands of them, scattered across the ocean floor like forgotten punctuation, marks in the vast sentence of human history. Some are buried in sand. Others rest in canyons, beneath thick veils of pressure and time. They wait not in silence but in patience, and slowly, gently, we are beginning to reach them. The last few decades have brought a quiet revolution to underwater exploration. Where once we needed ships and ropes and heavy suits of brass and glass, we now have tools that drift as weightless as thoughts. Remotely operated vehicles, deep-sea submersibles, high-resolution sonar, and autonomous drones that can scan seabeds without ever disturbing a single shell. These tools do not rush, they do not thrash, they move with the stillness required by the deep. They peer into dark corners, take delicate photographs, and map vast fields of wreckage without ever touching. This technology has allowed us to see what once was unreachable. Wrecks so deep, so dark, so distant that they were beyond imagination only a generation ago. We have seen ships resting upright, their masts intact, their windows staring out into blackness. We have seen jars still sealed after 2,000 years, and shoes still laced, and flags gently resting where no current stirs. Each new discovery expands the story of who we were, of where we went, of what we lost. And yet, as we gain more access, more clarity, more power, new questions emerge. Ethical ones, cultural ones, questions about what it means to enter spaces that are, in many ways, graves. Questions about ownership, preservation, and respect. Not every wreck should be opened. Not every secret should be revealed. The ocean asks us to move slowly. And more than that, it asks us to listen. There is an ongoing effort now among archaeologists, conservators, marine biologists, and historians to explore responsibly, to see a wreck not as a prize, but as a partner in conversation. These are not resources to be mined. They are memories to be honored. For every ship that is raised, many more are left undisturbed, studied only through scans and gentle documentation. The focus is shifting from possession to protection. Some shipwrecks have even been declared underwater heritage sites, protected under international law, guarded from looting and decay. Others have been turned into underwater museums, Open only to divers, their stories told through placards and sonar-guided tours. And in each case, the question persists. How do we preserve without erasing? How do we understand without intruding? There is also something quietly poetic about how the ocean protects what we have forgotten. Long after a name disappears from books, long after a voyage is erased from maps, the wreck remains, covered in coral, wrapped in silence, waiting, a kind of gentle defiance, a way of saying that the past does not vanish. It only drifts. And what of the future? As sea levels rise, as storms grow stronger, as coastlines shift, we are faced with a new kind of reckoning, not only with how we explore the past, but how we protect it. Some wrecks may soon be swallowed entirely. Others may be exposed after centuries of slumber. And so we must ask ourselves what we truly value and why. Do we remember shipwrecks only for their drama, their gold, their tragedy? Or do we remember them because they show us who we are when plans fall apart, when nature reminds us of its scale, when silence becomes the only story left? In quiet moments like this, as you lie still, letting the waves of sound settle softly around you, perhaps the most important truth of shipwrecks is not their sinking, but their staying, the fact that they remain, that they continue to rest on the ocean floor, changing, but not vanishing, teaching, even without speaking. Their lessons are not loud, they are not urgent, they are slow, steady, gentle. Like the sea itself, they teach us patience, they teach us humility. They teach us that what is lost is not always gone, that memory is more than knowledge. It is presence. It is the soft echo that remains even when the sound has faded. So now, as we close this long and quiet journey through the world of shipwrecks, let yourself drift. Let your breath slow. Let your thoughts fall gently like light through water. You have visited vessels once proud, now still. You have heard the whispers of sailors, the silence of lost crews, the stories held by spoons and buttons and lanterns. You have walked through museums of coral, and you have sat quietly with mysteries that may never be solved. Let that be enough. You do not need to know everything. You only need to listen. Thank you for joining this calm exploration into the depths. If you find peace in these stories, if you enjoy history told slowly, gently, without rush, consider leaving a like, subscribing, sharing this moment with someone who may need it. And perhaps, if you feel moved, leave a comment below, not to be loud, but to be part of this quiet remembering, a thought, a name, a feeling, something small, something soft, something you would like the sea to hold. Good night, and may the stories beneath the waves watch over your sleep.